Okay, this was my first encounter, the one that got me into the Bigfoot phenomenon. This was back in November of 2002 at a place called Heartland State Forest in DuBois County here in southern Indiana. A couple counties over from where we're at right now, matter of fact. The southern Indiana belt line through here, very squatchy area. But I didn't know that at the time. I didn't know anything about Bigfoot. So I made a little fire there. Well, let me explain the area first. You know, it was down to at the end of the forest. There's a rock road over a dam. There's a lake here, and there's a little cutout back there in the back. Had like 4 picnic tables, fire pits, and an outhouse, and that was it. You could primitive camp there, but again, there wasn't nobody there. There wasn't nobody in the whole park but me. Like I said, it gets dark early in the fall, about 5:30. It's probably only around 8, 9 o'clock at the most. And out of this quiet November night, there was a big hill there that went up around the lake. And there's a hiking trail up on top of the hill. And from that top of the hill, something started coming down it with real loud, thunderous footsteps. I'm talking breaking tree branches, breaking sticks on the ground. It sounded like a Sherman tank was coming down off that hill. I mean, I've never heard something so loud out in the forest. Matter of fact, I was completely baffled and sitting there dumbfounded as it kept getting closer and closer. And I'm like, OMG, man, what is this coming? So there's a big white birch. You can go out there now, it's still there. Big white birch, about 4 foot in diameter. He stopped right behind that tree. And that's when I could hear the breathing. You know, he was only 20 feet from me. 20 measly feet. And I could hear the I mean, it sounded like coming through a bass speaker. And again, I'm like, oh gosh, what is this? I mean, what is going on, man? I couldn't comprehend it. I really don't want to believe what's going on, man. I mean, I'm at the point of, am I in a monster movie? But the only difference, this is not a movie, it's real. And there's some kind of beast right there. You know, I just got out of the Navy a few years back. I'm well trained in arms. I can defend myself. And whatever that was coming down, sitting there behind a tree, I had to do something quick. And I learned in the Navy, you know, for every action, there better be a reaction, because if you don't have a reaction within a split second, you could buy the farm. That could be your last breath. So I remembered, I jumped up, my Grand Prix was parked right there. I had a 45 in the console with a clip in it, halfway up the handle. So I reached in, I got it. I put the clip in, I cocked me around in the chamber, and I was ready. I was on my feet, I had the gun pointed towards the tree. I kept talking to this thing. What are you? Who are you? What are you gonna do to me? Don't hurt my dog, don't hurt me. I had all these different emotions running through my brain. Good ones, bad ones. Am I gonna die? Am I gonna get out of this alive? I mean, I don't know what's going on. And I was doing everything I could to scare this thing. I was saying every cuss word in the book. And I mean some of them multiple times. But again, the breathing, he wasn't going anywhere. So I told him numerous times, if he come around that tree, I was gonna blast him dead. I told him I had a firearm in my hand and I was gonna kill him. I'm like, look, I don't want no trouble from you. I'm not here for no trouble. I go, just leave me alone and everything's gonna be all right. And I started getting angry. I started getting my warrior mode on. I was ready to do battle. No, I didn't run. I wasn't scared at this point. I was defending myself and my property, my dog. So again, I'm screaming for Buddy, and he would not come. So I knew I had to get one thing. I had to get my dog, get him back to my car, and get out of Dodge. And I had to do it now. I was killing precious time. Every second could cost me my life. So I baby stepped up to my dog, not taking my pistol off that tree. I got to my dog. I got him up on my lap. Yeah, I'm right-handed, so it was kind of hard lifting a 120-pound dog up and still taking aim on that tree and knowing you're in a vulnerable situation where he's gonna come out any second. So I'm going back. I'm taking steps back to my car. Again, I keep telling him, don't come around that tree. I'm gonna kill you. So as I get to my car, I throw Buddy in the back seat. I jump in and I back up to the back of the dam where the rock road goes over the dam. So I went back up there and I hit my brights. And I glanced up at that tree, and lo and behold, I seen an arm from the fingers back to the elbow wrapped around this 4-foot tree, covering the whole length of it damn near, with black hair hanging on it. I couldn't get off of my mind what happened. What was it? Who was it? I was just baffled, man. I mean, it blew my mind and changed my whole world that night.
Far and wide across the United States are spread massive, wild, and beautiful stretches of land referred to as state parks and national forests. Nearly every corner of the Heartland is within reach of a state park or national forest, and very often, depending on where one happens to be, there's likely to be more than one. The Heartland is riddled with them, from Ohio to Michigan to Kentucky to Indiana, and beyond. The history of state parks and national forests in the United States is rooted in the 19th century conservation movement, but their creation and purpose evolved along different paths. National forests were established for the multiple use of resources, while state parks developed as a response to local recreational and conservation needs. Regardless of designation, these areas in which human beings meet the woods are also areas in which they occasionally meet something truly wild. In 2021, in Mohican State Park in Ohio, a woman and her best friend were enjoying a quiet afternoon in an RV when one of them suggested they try issuing a Bigfoot call, as they'd recently seen on a television program. They did so, expecting nothing to come of it, but shortly after heard two sharp knocks coming from outside the RV a short distance away. A bit later, a rock approximately 6 inches in diameter was flung at the RV from beyond the trees, its source not visible. Finally, the witness would describe seeing a large, muscular leg with a human-like foot and a bodybuilder's musculature disappearing behind a tree as an unidentified creature moved out of sight. Within the Heartland, precise numbers vary, but on the whole, state forests easily outnumber national forests. For example, Ohio has 24 state forests to its 1 national forest. Michigan has 6 state forests and 3 national forests. Kentucky has 10 state forests and 2 national forests. Indiana has 15 state forests and 1 national forest. Between all of these states, there are millions of acres that are designated as state and national forest land. It should be noted that there is a difference between national forests and national parks. Perhaps the greatest difference between the two is the multiple use mandate for national forests. While national parks focus on preservation, national forests are managed for a variety of productive purposes, including fishing, timber, and recreation. A family hike in spring of 2017 yielded a sighting of a black-coated Sasquatch by a man and his 2 daughters in Au State Forest in Michigan. This gargantuan 9-foot-tall specimen sported a patch of white hair on its back near the shoulder. The witness reported that the creature ran with amazing speed, but the strangest aspect of the report concerned a second animal, a wolf, which ran alongside the upright creature at full stride, seeming to indicate a relationship with this supposed Sasquatch.
State forests, there's a bunch. We've had a lot of ground set aside, from very small ones to larger ones like Clifty Falls here. Others right around the road. Hoosier National Forest is probably the most prominent national park we have. Other than that, you get up north and they're really not parks. It's like along Lake Michigan, they have the dunes and things like that, but they're really not parks. The southern half of the state is the majority of the Hoosier National Forest, and then a lot of the state areas. Morgan Monroe is kind of to the north side, up where you were with Nashville and such yesterday, up in that area. Morgan Monroe is up there, Brown County State Park, and Hoosier National covers huge ground. But there's a lot of, Spring Mill is a big one. It's also down there a little bit east or northwest of here. But the majority of our larger state parks is the southern part of the state.
Forest, and then we have Cuyahoga Valley National Park, which isn't technically a national forest, and then state forests. You're going to have the big ones are going to be Shawnee down in Scioto County. You have Zaleski and Tar Hollow in Vinton County, and then of course you're going to have Yellow Creek, which is going to be over in Columbiana County, and the Pike State Forest in Pike County, and so there's some pocket state forests here and there, but we do get reports in and around those areas, and it's usually by people just passing through the area. I mean, I remember in Pike State Forest, I think that was a funny one because the guy literally, it was like one of these coming home at 3 in the morning, had to take a leak, just pulled his car off the side of the road right on the edge of the state forest, goes to take a leak, and his car's running, and all of a sudden he hears something move, and he looks over and walks right behind his car, but a Bigfoot. And of course, he got caught with his pants down, which is even more ironic.
We have state forests, national forests. I think we only have really one, don't we? I think it's the Wayne National, I think, right? And if I remember right, that's big. It's like 240,000 acres, I think. So I think that's the main one. But I mean, with any kind of state forest, like national forest, they've got so much terrain that they can cover where they could be in there without ever being found.
There is a large presence of state parks and state forestries.
Yeah, and in and around Wayne, there's always going to be sightings here popping up here and there, but you have to remember something. A national forest like that, during the summer months, we'll get a lot of activity in terms of people activity, but not a lot the rest of the year. So there's a lot of times during the year where that big forest is not getting any visitors. The ATV trails are closed, and and there's the Buckeye Trail that goes through, and you get a few reports in and around there, but it's such a big area. And if I'm right, Wayne is close to like 250 or 300,000 acres or more. So it's a lot of acreage and it has a trail network, but not like you would want. And yeah, we've had reports in and around the edges of the forest and things like that. But I mean, not as many as you would think, and I think it's because of the lack of people.
The state of Ohio is home to 24 state forests and 1 national forest, which is Wayne National Forest. For whatever reason, the national forest is split up into 3 units or tracts, one of which is Athens, near Ohio University. The other two are as far south as Marietta, and then Ironton is the third portion of Wayne. So 1 national forest, 24 state forests, and of course 1 national park as well, Cuyahoga Valley. I think the unique thing about our state forests, and they have this in common, is that I think without exception they're all second growth forest, which is to say we don't have much, if any, in the way of old growth forest left in Ohio. But what we do have at this point are second growth forests that are somewhere between 40 to 100 years old, which gives the impression of at least an old growth or long-term forest. And certainly it's led to a renewal of the health of our outdoor areas. And like in the case of Salt Fork State Park, for example, it's shocking to look at the pictures from when that park was founded, because there are no trees visible. We tend to think of Salt Fork as this huge forest, but it's a second growth forest, and all those trees were planted so that everything that we see now, back in the mid 20th century, that had all been harvested, that had all been cut to the ground. And it's hard for us to conceive of, so that when we go back historically, it's really hard to take almost, to look at what had been done to those areas in terms of their deforestation.
Well, I think, we have an abundance of food, which is good. We have less large predators, so I think it makes it better for them for having young and things like that. That's just my personal opinion, that they come in the areas, have young, and they don't have to worry about fighting off bears everywhere and mountain lions and that whole kind of thing.
What makes our forests pretty special is just the tree species that produce mast for the forest floor. It's typically oak hickory forests, a lot of them. And anything that produces a heavy mast on the forest floor is going to have a big deer population, which is going to attract people who want to hunt the deer, and obviously Bigfoot want to hunt the deer. So that's going to be a direct correlation that, when you have oak hickory forest, you're going to have Bigfoots around because the deer are going to be around.
Hoosier National Forest has come up a few times. What is unique about that versus the state parks? What's the difference, I guess?
It's massive.
It's massive, and it's scattered all across southern Indiana. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's not all together, so you'll have sections of the Hoosier National in different areas. Some of the areas that you can go in can be a lot larger, thousands of acres, and then others may not be that much, but it's scattered out all over southern Indiana. And then on most of that, they have primitive camping in it, but that's about it.
And that's just pull off the road into a spot, pretty much.
Yeah, you pull off the road into a spot. There is Hardin Ridge that sits down on Lake Monroe, which is part of the Hoosier National, and that's a national park down there.
Yeah.
Most of them are heavily wooded, may have a lake in them. The parks are geared towards, like any other park,
State parks.
Camping,
Youth activities.
Youth activities and things like that. The state forest here, that's timber.
Yeah.
They're a tree farm. That's what the state forests are. That's the difference because the state does log all of our forest. They log it for the logs to make money off of it, to help fund a lot of the state funds and local and county funds come from timber out of the state forest. All the state forestries are hunted. They're hunting areas, and then even the parks, they hunt the parks to keep the deer population down.
Yeah.
so they have to hunt the state parks.
The state forests and national parks of the United States may seem similar on the surface, but have distinct characteristics from territory to territory. Owing to the natural climates and environments in which they are found, our forests and parks are diverse environments, allowing for extremes in temperature and severe weather. Noting the differences between these types of land is important, as it affects what activities are permitted there, and by proxy, how many potential witnesses are likely to be on the ground in a given area at a particular time. More often than not, national forests border national parks or other federal lands. However, it's also pretty common to find national forests on their own nowhere near a park. It all depends on the use of the land. National forests are still managed by the federal government, but they have a different approach to protecting the landscape within. While parks aim to preserve the natural scenery, forests usually incorporate a more multi-use approach where people are allowed to utilize the land for services. This could include logging, grazing, mining, fishing, off-roading, hunting, and more. Each forest has its own limits on what can and can't be done on its land, but most forests are typically more relaxed about recreation restrictions. State forests are managed through a planning process that sets goals for multiple uses, such as timber production, wildlife habitat, and recreation, while also focusing on forest health and biodiversity. Management strategies include implementing selective logging, tree planting, controlled burns, and controlling invasive species to foster a resilient and diverse ecosystem. State agencies develop annual work plans and multi-year strategies that are often subject to public comment, ensuring transparent and collaborative management of these public lands. And on very rare occasions, state officials become directly involved in handling Bigfoot reports. In August of 2020, a Muskingum Watershed Conservancy District park ranger working Ohio's Mohican State Forest filed an incident call record report detailing a series of events that unfolded in a primitive camp area. A husband and wife with 2 kids experienced sticks being thrown at their campsite, with other loud sounds escalating their sense of unease. Finally, an abrupt knocking noise on the side of the wooden outhouse drew their attention to a tall, hairy figure running into the shadowy woods. The ranger conducted a sweep of the surrounding campground and found no evidence of a threat to the family. The official sighting report was provided by managers of Pleasant Hill Lake Park, the location of the incident.
See, the hunting thing is what always impresses me, because there is a lot of people where we have a lot of the state parks and stuff have, public hunting. So a lot of these guys are out there, and they're the ones who run into them. And the thing that always amazes me is, like, you never hear of anyone taking a real shot at one. You hear stories, but there's nothing that can be confirmed. And I think that's what it is just these hunters are out there. They go out a little farther than the average person who's just taking a stroll. And, they run into them doing whatever they're doing about their business, hunting, sleeping, whatever, and they come across them, or sometimes I think that the hunters are actually found by them because they're curious as to what they're doing.
Yeah, at least in logging, that is one of the things that the state forests are charged with doing, is managing logging. So any logging that's done on those lands is done in connection with those departments. Certainly hunting and recreation is another major feature of the state forest lands and the national forest as well. And that's one of their reasons for being. So they're trying to split the difference between doing those two things. The leasing is the portion that I'm least, I have very little information on that, but I would assume that goes hand in hand. And at least in southern Ohio, there's fracking that's going on, and I don't know to what degree state forests or national forests are involved with that, but I'm sure that there would have to be a number of regulations that would need to be met in order for that to take place. But that's still to this day, it's hotly contested, the practice of mining and fracking those lands.
You know, there's been some incidents over near like, Yellow Creek State Forest, which the creek, Yellow Creek, flows right into the Ohio River, so that'd be Columbiana County, over in there, where there were a couple just hikers out there hiking along the creek and encountered not just like multiple, but like 3 or 4 individuals at the same time, and it was still light out, so they got a look at all of them as the 4 of them moved away from the area. And the interesting thing, that report happened around 1989, and what I liked about it was right near an area that had a ton of known activity, including audio recordings, Class A sightings, sheriff reports, things like that. So it kind of helps substantiate some of those claims being totally unrelated. They had no clue of these other stories, didn't know anything about Bigfoot. It just was a couple hikers, innocent people. Let's just say they went to Kent State, and so a couple young ladies, but it scared them, even though the Bigfoots did not threaten them. But to see them there, and basically they were pretty close to the creek edge when they were seen, and they pretty much just skedaddled very gingerly away up the hillside. But it really, let's just say this, that the hiking trip ended. Their little adventure, as they called it. So they said there was definitely one much larger than the other 3, and that the 2 smaller, the 2 were at least 6 feet tall or more. So, and the biggest one was probably 8.5 feet. So it was probably a mom, dad, and a couple, teens, let's just say. And but they didn't show any fear, no aggression. Like I said, just kind of spooked them, and they typical Bigfoot.
It was in a state forest. There were several of us back there in this one parking area way back in the forest. And we were just all standing around talking, and we were getting some interaction. Some rocks were being thrown, some little noises and stuff. And I don't know, for whatever reason, I walked around the vehicles and then along between the vehicles and the tree line. And when I walked around there, lo and behold, right in front of me was this tall Bigfoot. I'm getting chilly bumps. But he was, to me, he was 10 feet tall. But he wasn't that tall, but he towered over me. I couldn't see his eyes because he was tall enough that he was looking down at me. But I just stood there. You would think you would scream bloody murder. I mean, oh my gosh. But I just stood there really calm. I didn't really feel anything. I remember his face. I remember his hair or fur or whatever you want to call it. It was beautiful. It was black, but it was like, it just cascaded down over his shoulders. It was just, I think he was beautiful. But, and that was basically it. I don't know how long I stood there. Everybody else was over on the other side of the vehicles doing their thing. But it's just like, I just walked away from him and come around. And the first person I saw was Nancy, Leroy's wife. And the only thing I said was, I've got the heebie-jeebies. And that was it. I never said anything for a couple of days. I don't know. I know what I saw, and I knew he was real. But I guess in my mind, I was processing it. What did I really see? Did I really see what I feel like I saw? And of course, when I finally did tell them, they were all mad at me because, why did you say something? But I did walk back around a little later, and of course he was gone. But that was my experience. I still see him to this day. If I think about him, I could see him. His eyes were closed. It was kind of wrinkly a little bit, I remember. I won't say it was like a gorilla's face, but maybe a little bit. I didn't notice any hair or anything on his actual face. It was just, everything else was covered in that beautiful black, long, like he just stepped out of a salon almost to me, it looked like. And that was basically it, because it was like, I don't know if I was mesmerized or whatever, but it was just like, I just stared. I just stood there and stared.
And were you the first to walk away, or did he?
I walked away.
Okay.
The logging areas, when they go into the state forest and they log that area, it'll push them out of that area for a while.
Yeah.
Then they will come back once the growth comes back. But I think it just pushes them around. We got one area that they logged by us not too long ago, just kind of ruined the area that we was in. It's like, dang it.
Yeah.
You kind of ruined that
Bad,
area,
a lot.
but it probably pushed them farther back in, more into private land that borders all these state forestries. They push them more back into those private lands. But once the tree growth, the undergrowth comes back up and it gets dense in there again, then they'll be right back in that area again. They don't stay out that long.
A lot of our state parks just in the last few years have opened up for controlled hunts a lot, more than just free hunting, because a lot of them may butt up to a military type base or things like that, industry. So they'll have more controlled hunts, and it's basically about population control when they do those. So that's only been more prevalent in probably the last, I'd be afraid to guess, maybe 8 to 10 years at the most. And they don't do large number of hunters.
Yeah, I mean, it's a common practice, especially now, the leasing of the lands to other hunters. And yeah, there's a lot of incidents where hunters have, Class A, Class B encounters with Bigfoots while hunting lands by just even doing surveying the land, things like that, especially for hunting season and doing their scouting, having weird incidents happen. A lot of wood knocks, a lot of howls, a lot of things like that, some sightings here and there. I mean, but it is pretty common, and like I say, it's just one of those situations where you got to be in the right place at the right time, but they're out there and they're around. There's just a lot of land to cover.
And there's also a story out of Athens County, Nelsonville, Ohio. It's September 1994. From a squirrel hunter who was just out walking along a certain ridge line, and he walked past something in the woods that originally he took for a large stump that all of a sudden took off running. He said he was within 10 feet of this object and he thought nothing of it because it was he wasn't doing anything. It was moving, it looked like a tree. But after he cleared it, he heard it running at first and looked over to see something 7 to 8 feet tall, dark brown in color, running away. And as it ran, it made what he described as a high-pitched monkey sound. And in the wake of that sighting, he broke down on the spot. And he said he was all the hair on his body raised, even hairs he didn't know that he had. And he broke down in tears for reasons that he wasn't completely, cognizant of why, but just the sheer shock of the experience. Here was an experienced hunter, and he had been fooled, essentially, by this large creature that had been standing stock still and had let him go by and then run away. So I think that's pretty notable as far as cases go. How these lands are used is another important aspect of the equation, as this also plays a role in determining how many people are likely to be around. Hunting is permitted in U.S. national forests, and in nearly all states it is quite common. Hunting in a national forest is not much different than hunting on most public lands, but there may be rules about seasons, species, and areas in which you can hunt. National forests are not national parks, the latter of which tend to have more strict regulations about hunting. The key difference is that national forests are managed for multiple purposes, including timber, recreation, grazing, wildlife, fish, and more. National parks, however, have a vested interest in preservation, keeping the land and its wildlife as minimally altered as possible. State forests seem to follow the same rules, but are bound to state regulations as would any national forest, depending on which state it's in. Logging is a trickier subject and appears to be up to the state to determine when it comes to state forests. In recent days, the executive branch of the United States government has issued orders allowing for streamlined permitting in hopes of increasing production by 25%. As one might expect, this action was met with concern and controversy, sparking debate whether or not logging would solve the problem of wildfires. Regardless, the U.S. Forest Service has appeared to support this initiative. The subject of leasing state forest land is a somewhat tangled one. The bottom line is that leasing is allowed, though often restricted to specific uses and regulated by state agencies, such as the Pennsylvania Department of Conservation and Natural Resources, which has a system for leasing campsites, and the Minnesota DNR, which has studied forest management leasing. In other words, interested parties need to check with the specific state's forestry or natural resource department to see if leasing is permitted for an intended purpose and to understand the applicable rules and procedures. Of course, state regulations mean nothing to a creature that calls the forest home. In 2002, a man was surveying the border of his property where it met a logging area near Pennsboro, West Virginia, when he saw a large figure walking on two legs, which he described as being 7 to 8 feet tall. He mentioned he had a distinct feeling of being watched while in that area of the woods, and that he had also heard strange howling noises coming from the woods near his home.
Probably mostly up there in the Brown County, Morgan Monroe area, as far as there's a lot of one that sticks out to me. It was a father and son doing a spring turkey hunt, and they both observed this creature, and kind of sounds like the daughter took a break from hunting for a while, but she had been fairly active with her dad, but it gave her the put a little fear in her, I guess, just seeing something like that and not being able to reconcile it in your own mind quickly, so it had affected her, her wanting to be out there. But that's probably one that sticks out the most. More recent.
Yeah. Did it come up to them, or was it like seen through a scope?
No, it was actually a not too far of a distance view, and it was very. That was another one of those times where they say it looked very human.
Some of the backstory to that is that we was in this area and we had a guy that Nancy and I used to work with, and he had been divorced, new girlfriend. We happened to run into him during the day, and he was introducing us and telling us that we Bigfoot, and she was all excited and wanted to go. So I said, well, we're going tonight if you want to go with us. So they came. Now he, total joke to him, it's a total joke. So we had some rocks or something that was being thrown at us. But then I called him throwing a rock back in. So at that point, I just discounted anything that we heard. But it wasn't just shortly after this, in the short time frame, which would have been like 90 degrees from us, someone called. They said, hey, I just seen something walk across the road down there. And so we're kind of looking at that, and then it wasn't too long after that, which would have been 180 behind us, is when Debbie walked around that side of the truck. So if there was something over there that was in front of us that was throwing something at us, went down, went across the road, and come back up the other side, and that's when she had seen him.
Yeah, and later, because I believe that they are aware or tied into your emotions. And when I talked to Edie about it, the person he mentioned before, she said, I was going through some stuff, personal things, and she said, he wanted you to see him, or you would not have seen him. And she says, and that's why you felt the calm. When you saw him, you felt calmness.
And we believe that is true. The one lady that I was telling you about, that it's around her house, same thing. Whenever she was having a lot of issues, that's when she would see the one. We had a guy just this last year that's going through a divorce. Same thing.
Yeah.
He had one stepped out, and he's seen it.
Yeah.
You know, because he was just mentally in a rough spot. Turmoil going through his divorce. And we have heard this several times when people are having a major stress, major problems, that one will step out and show theirself.
I just know there was one fella in Salt Fork. He actually won't go back hunting and fishing because he actually had an encounter there, and it scared him so bad he literally just decided he's not going to go back. And his report was from 2016. I'd have to look it up, but he was out there hunting with his brother-in-law, and they were separate, you know, and he came across one, and it scared him like so bad he wound up running out, and he to his car, literally left his brother-in-law out in the woods and never came back for him. They wound up finding him almost at dark, you know, when they came back. He was waiting, he was stationary, he was actually hunting, and it walked up to him. You know, he saw it coming over a hill line, and that was it for him.
Did he let his brother-in-law know anything?
Nope, he just took off and ran.
There's a story of a series of sightings and culminating in some minor interactions taking place in a location called the Haga Ridge. This is on a property that borders the Wayne National Forest down in Athens County. And things really got started there in November of 2001, where a teenager in this family claimed to have a sighting of a white Bigfoot at relatively close range, about 50 feet. When the Bigfoot perceived that it was being seen, it growled audibly at the teenager, who turned tail quickly, went home, told the family what was going on, was originally greeted with skepticism. But things began to happen around that household that were not easily explained, typically described in terms of footprints that were found. On a couple different occasions, 2 or 3 trackways were found simultaneously, suggesting the existence of a family group in those places. And things sort of came to a head when one of the family's bird feeders was bent almost in half for the apparent purpose of being the feed inside being accessed. Around the feeders, tracks of various quality were discovered. I don't know if those were casted necessarily, but that led to 2 or 3 sets of red eyes being observed in the surrounding forest by various members of the family, including kind of the matriarch of the family, who was still living at that point. Again, this is 2002. And so all of this was taking place in land bordering the Wayne National Forest in Athens County, which seems to be, at least at a certain time historically, we're getting a lot of reports to BFRO out of that portion of Athens County.
We've had just a ton of reports in and around that Scioto, Adams County area, all through there. It's all associated with Shawnee State Forest. You know, just people driving through, people being followed out. You know, hunters. I remember one where the hunters were hunting. I think it was Hobie Hollow, and they were legally hunting coyotes, and not that one. And of course, when you hunt coyotes, you do like wounded fawn, wounded rabbit calls, and they have like a red light, because what happens, the coyotes don't see the light, they come in, and then they see them and they shoot them. Well, of course, they hear something coming through the creek, okay, which is what Hobie Hollow is. And when it came through the creek and came into view, it wasn't a coyote, it was about a 9-foot tall Sasquatch that scared the living bejesus out of the hunters. And of course the Bigfoot, and here's what really interested me, because they said the Bigfoot didn't appear to see the light. That's the one thing, like as investigators, we tend to use red light in the field at night, because we're going with that theory that they don't see the red light, so they'll come closer to you, where if you have white light or any other, they bolt and they're long gone. So it was kind of interesting that it came that close, and it just turned around, went back into the holler. And I remember being on that investigation. I had my brother with me. This is many years ago, and I remember we were walking out the holler. And you know how you just have that feeling something isn't right? And it was like we're on one side of the creek, and literally you'd move, you could hear something on the other side, snap, tap, crackle, pop. You would continue, you'd hear something again. So not that you saw anything, but it was just, that was one of the few times I think I've ever been in the woods like that, where even though it was daytime, you just were very uncertain. Something did not feel right about there.
State and national forests, with their varied purposes, have consistently brought people into close contact with the natural world. When those people have a positive experience in nature, they often become advocates for a careful use of its resources. But when they have a frightening experience in the wild, the relationship becomes complex. An encounter with Sasquatch leaves some wondering if they'll ever pitch a tent again. An extraordinary encounter was reported in June of 2008 by Bigfoot Field Research Organization investigator Pam Lovins. Brought to the Daniel Boone National Forest in Rowan County, Kentucky, to evaluate ongoing activity near Cave Run Lake, Lovins ended up having an extremely close-range sighting of her own. In the glow of her red headlamp, she happened upon a Sasquatch no more than 20 feet away. She described its face as gentle and intelligent, with a heavy brow ridge and human-like lips. One of her companions obtained video footage of eyeshine at the same time as her sighting, coming from a different part of the woods. In September 1978, a mother driving across the Upper Peninsula of Michigan pulled over to rest at a picnic area on the edge of the Hiawatha National Forest. With her 18-month-old son in his car seat next to her, she fell asleep, only to be wakened by a horrible odor. She turned on the headlights, expecting to see a bear, but instead came face to face with a gigantic Sasquatch bending over the hood of her car, peering in through the windshield. Throwing the car in reverse, she fled the area, but continued to wonder why the creature didn't flinch when she had turned the headlights on it.
And I started going to the forest closer to my house, Clark State Forest in Clark County, Indiana. Indiana's largest and oldest forest, by the way. That's where this next encounter took place. I was walking on a trail called the Knob Stone Trail. It's considered to be rough as the Appalachian Trail, but it's only 66 miles. So it was 2005, right around the same time period in November. Right around Thanksgiving, it got dark around 5:30. So we were at the turning point, and it was still light. Not as light as here, but I mean, it was getting late in the afternoon, but there was still plenty of light. And we sat down. We always sat down in one spot, the turnaround point I called it. And this little deer comes walking by. Yeah, he wasn't no bigger than 2 feet off the ground. Yeah, he looked like Rudolph. A little proud buck. He had little sprouts coming out, his little antlers that were fuzzy, and he was prancing into these, it looked like a big wall of ivy, a big wall of honeysuckle, that kind of green that stays green the last part while everything else dies off. And he walked behind that, and I couldn't see what happened, but a big commotion broke out. I heard a lot of stompings, sticks breaking. It sounded like an all-out fight going on over there. Buddy's ears are up, something was going on. Then all of a sudden, this deer comes flying out of there. He wasn't thrown out. He jumped, and he was flying like a reindeer. He hit the ground, he did it again. So all of a sudden, Buddy's head went from looking at the deer, he snapped over this way, and immediately his hair all stood up. He started growling really, ferocious. Never heard him like that. And I'm sitting there, going, oh no. I know, I just knew it had to be a Bigfoot there. But I was wrong. When I lifted my head up, it wasn't a Bigfoot. It was 2 Bigfoots. And I was totally just freaked out, amazed. I finally got to see one up close and personal, about 50, 60, 70 feet away at the most. And they were standing there right by that ivy. Well, they just tried to get that deer there. And they were standing shoulder to shoulder. Not too far, like I said, away from us. So I got up on my 2 legs. I didn't have a gun. I didn't have a knife. I didn't have anything. All I had was Buddy. I wasn't expecting to see these things again. I thought that was a million shot in the dark would happen out in Ferdinand. It would probably never happen again. But it did. And they were standing there. And the first one I looked at was a big red one. And he had wrinkles all on his forehead, receding hairline. He looked very, very old. I really didn't fear that one. Then I looked at the other one. He was like Little Kong. That's what I nicknamed this one, Little Kong. He was huge. Just big bustling muscles, ripples everywhere. I have never seen a specimen like that in my life. Just pure strength and power. And they were standing down that hill, and they were eye level with me. So, and I'm 6'5", 6'6", so they were every bit of 9, 10 feet, looking me right in the eye. So Buddy was going nuts trying to get at him. I'm holding him back. All this stuff's going through my head. We're gonna die. There's no getting out of this one. 2 against me and my dog. We're not gonna make it out of here. So it was almost like I knew I was going, but they just sat there looking. No sounds, no movement. Just like 2 statues, like you are standing right there. They did not move one bit. And they kept looking down at Buddy. You know how you hear a lot of dogs are afraid of them? Well, I guarantee you this, Buddy sure wasn't. So I call this the knobstone stare down. This was a good 4 minutes of looking at these creatures, beings. I hate using the word creatures, but back then I really didn't know too much about them. But anyway, I told Buddy, I said, well, it's time to leave. Let's get out of here. And I looked at the 2 Bigfoots and I said, sorry guys, we're not on the menu today. We're leaving. And it's been nice watching you. I put his stuff in my backpack, threw it over my shoulder, nonchalantly, start walking down the trail. So I'm glancing over at them. I just know they're gonna come after us. Yeah, because when we were up on a hill, you know, maybe they felt like I had the advantage because I was, you know, I was uphill from them, and that's why they didn't come charging me or whatever, you know, defensive mode. And so I figured they'd come out and flank me and get me from the side on either side of the woods, you know, as I walked down the path. And I got back to my car safe and sound. Never seen the two gentlemen again before. And that's what I like to call them now, gentlemen, because they were perfect gentlemen that day. Well, I hear all these terrifying encounters and, you know, Bigfoot almost killed me and this and that. It was nothing but love that day and respect. I respected them. I didn't cuss them. I didn't say one word to them. I just looked. And they looked at me. And that was a huge step on my journey to the truth. And I've had encounters after that. But this was my day that I actually seen them in daylight, how big and massive they are, and how one looks so old, and how one looks so like the king of the forest. And that was it's another encounter that I think of daily, just like all my other ones. I mean, I wake up sometimes, that's the first thing on my mind. I will never forget them two massive beings there staring at me for 4 minutes.